guys, welcome back. Now today, I'm going to be doing my best NHL defenseman tier list. Now the amount of fantastic defensemen in the NHL right now is absolutely astounding. But where does every defenseman rank in my tier list, and who do I think are the best defensemen right now in the NHL? Watch till the end to find out. Now you can see the tiers on the screen right here. We'll have 5 different tiers. We'll be ranking every single defenseman in, starting out in decent, working our way up to good, then to elite, to franchise, and then up to the generational tier, the amazing tier right there. We have 28 different defensemen that will rank in 5 different tiers. Now I'll show the players' faces right here. These are the players and defensemen that we'll be ranking in today's video. These are the top 28 defensemen in my opinion, but these are the big household names. I also want to mention, if you see any defenseman that is not on this tier list, let me know down in the comments and I'll let you guys know exactly where they should be on this tier list. Now without further ado, we're going to get straight into it, and starting out in the decent tier, we have Duncan Keith. Now, Keith has been a great defenseman in the NHL in the past, but right now he's a lot more older, past his prime for sure, and he's just a decent NHL defenseman. I think he's okay, he's an average defenseman, definitely not what he used to be though. I think when it comes to Keith, some people might think that he's still a top 2 defenseman, which is never the case whatsoever. I don't think he's been that for probably the last 3 years, I would say. Still he is a defenseman, but nothing more. Now moving on to the good tier, and this is where it opens up completely. And for the first player in the good tier, I have Aaron Ekblad. Now he was, I would say, a little bit closer to elite tier than some other defensemen. He puts up a ton of points, a ton of goals, and on the power play, he's an absolute beast. To me, there are some definite concerns over his overall defensive ability. He is a big defenseman, and I think offensively, he is very, very worthwhile. Right now, though, he's just a good NHL defenseman, but I think he can maybe be an elite as soon as next season. And here comes the selection that will trigger most LA Kings fans. I have Drew Dowdy in the good tier. Now, if we're going off this past season, Drew Dowdy at best was a good defenseman. I'm putting that lightly because he was very, very average. And yes, he did put up points, I think like 44 or something, and that's decent on an LA team that does not score any goals, but still even then, defensively, he's an absolute dumpster fire. He hasn't been given that respect for the past couple of years, and offensively, I think he is overrated overall. And Drew Dowdy, I think, is still a great defenseman, one of the top in the league if he does rebound, but right now, he's just only good. For my next player in the good tier, my next defenseman, I have Dustin Byfuglien. He's the 3rd guy in the good tier, and I think he's a good, maybe close to elite defenseman, but health has been a huge issue for him. Offense is a big key of his game. He brings a lot of that, and points-wise, he's very good at that. Brings some physicality, of course, one of the brands of his game, especially in the past 10 years. Defensively, he is not the greatest. I think he can definitely use some work, but that's not his bread and butter. The offense is his bread and butter, the physicality is his bread and butter, and I respect that. He's definitely an agitating type of defenseman, and that's what he does best. The 4th defenseman in the good tier, for my next defenseman, I have Jacob Trouba. Now, Jacob Trouba of Winnipeg, again, was kind of a confusing player. A guy that I think has a ton of talent and a ton of upside, but hasn't really gotten that full defensive game put together. Points-wise, again, like a Dustin Byfuglien, he puts up points, especially on the power play. He definitely does that well. But other than that, defensively, there is a lot to work on there. From the New York Rangers, he'll get a lot more playing time, a lot more time on ice, and a lot more opportunity. For my second Florida Panthers defenseman in the good tier, I have Keith Yandle, an absolute offensive dynamo, one of the best offensive defensemen in the league today. But the problem is that defense, and I can't really ignore that whatsoever. Again, one of your responsibilities as a defenseman is to play a little bit of defense, and Keith Yandle doesn't even play a little bit. He plays none of it. And I do respect the offense, because it is fantastic, but I like my all-around defenseman quite a bit, and Keith Yandle is kind of the opposite. Now for the next pick that might leave a couple of people confused, I have Oliver Ekman-Larsson in the good tier. And again, going off this past season, I think he was kind of good at best. I wouldn't say he was elite last season or franchise last season. He was just pretty decent. And for Arizona, again, they needed Oliver Ekman-Larsson to be that franchise guy. And last season, I don't think he was really that. He did put up a ton of points, and that's fantastic. But the defense was kind of average. The overall numbers, especially advanced stat-wise, were kind of meh. And in my opinion, I love me some Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I have his freaking jersey of all places, but I do like him. But having him in the franchise tier after last season, or even the elite tier, is kind of a mistake in my opinion. Moving on to the next Swedish stud, my next good defenseman, I have Rasmus Dolan. Now, of course, with the Buffalo Sabres, one rookie year, but a pretty good rookie year at that. Took up a ton of points and was decent defensively for a team that doesn't have a lot of defense. And Rasmus Dolan, of course, will get a big opportunity in the next couple of years. He's, I would say, a generational potential-wise defenseman. Had a good year last year, but I think we'll see the best of him in the next few years when Buffalo gives him a much better chance. And moving on to maybe the best defenseman outside of the elite tier, I have Ryan Suter. Now, this was, again, very hard for me to put in the good tier. He had a decent year last year, nothing crazy amazing, but a pretty good one at that. And Ryan Suter, I have a ton of respect for. For being that old, he still has a ton of production, and is, again, one of the better defensive guys in the league, too. Has a ton of points up on the board, puts up a ton of points, especially on the power play. I do like his style quite a bit, and I do definitely admire the two-way game. He was so close to elite tier that it's kind of almost unfair. For my next defenseman in the good tier, I have Shay Webber. Now, when he is healthy, he's a fantastic defenseman, one of the better ones in the league, especially offensively, where he packs a huge punch. But that's just the big question there, because the health has been a huge question in the past couple of years. He has not been able to stay healthy, and Montreal's kind of needed his presence. He is the captain now. He has that responsibility. If he is healthy, I think he'll have a great year next year. But this past season was just good. Now moving on to the last player in the good tier, and next up I have Zack Kerensky of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now in his rookie year, I was a huge fan of what he brought. He was absolutely fantastic. In the last couple of years, it hasn't quite gone the greatest for him. It's still been good, obviously being in the good tier, but not that elite level that I kind of expected from him. As guys like obviously Matt Duchene and all the guys they left off the board, going to free agency, guys like Zack Kerensky will have to step up big time. I think that can happen next season. Advancing on to the elite tier of NHL defensemen, and starting us off, I have Colton Parayko of the St. Louis Blues. Now, I've always been a huge fan of Parayko and what he's bringing. In the past couple of years, he's stepped it up big time, becoming one of the best defensemen, not just for St. Louis, but in the NHL today. I think he's very underrated defensively, one of the best defensive guys in the NHL, and brings a lot of punch offensively. He's a great shot, has a lot of great passing ability, and on the power play is very, very dangerous. We saw that in the playoffs. Obviously, he was second fiddle to Petri, Angelo, but he was an amazing second fill that got it done every single game. Next up, moving on to one of the most underrated players, not just defensively, but in the entire league, I have Dougie Hamilton in the elite tier. I don't think people quite realize how good Dougie Hamilton was. He was super close to being in my franchise tier. He is that good. If you look at some of his advanced stats, it is absolutely nasty how good he is. One of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL. I would say a top 5 offensive defenseman. He is that good at producing, and not just with the points, but even in general. And when you watch him, he's so efficient and so fantastic. Defense is obviously not the greatest in my opinion, but the offense more than makes up for it being in the elite tier. Moving on to his bunch of jerks buddy, we have Jaccob Slavin in the elite tier. And Slavin has been an underrated defenseman for a while now. He, in this past year, has gotten a lot more recognition. And Slavin, I think, is a great defenseman. Again, very efficient, especially offensively, where he gets it done. And one of the better defensemen in the league, too, and can do everything. Again, I like my two-way defenseman, and Jaccob Slavin does everything well. He's not this guy that'll jump out as the best defenseman in the NHL at all, but he's a guy that gets it done every single game and has a tremendous impact on the areas you don't really see. Moving on to the first and only Washington Capitals defenseman in this tier list, I have John Carlson. Now, some people might say that he's a franchise defenseman, and I can see why you'd have him as a top defenseman in the NHL. I don't quite have that hype, but I think he's a fantastic defenseman, and obviously being in the elite tier is a very good honor. And when it comes to Carlson, he's a power play quarterback, a guy that has his speed, has his size, and uses it quite well. The physicality is there. The defense, I think, is a little bit overrated in his area, but the offense more than makes up for it, and he's shown that in the playoffs in the past couple of years. I'm going from a Capitals player onto a Pittsburgh Penguins player, and next up in the elite tier, I have Kris Letang. Now, I would say a couple years back, I used to be a huge hater of Kris Letang. I don't know why, but something about him just, I kind of hated it. But now, looking at his stats, looking at what he's done, and especially last season, I'm a lot more of a fan of him than I used to be. And Kris Letang, I think, again, when it comes to his offensive impact, it is so, so good. And he obviously has guys like Sidney Crosby, amazing players to go around. But he's a reason why they won those 3 Stanley Cups in those 10 years, and was able to do so well in that stretch. I think he's a giant defenseman for that franchise, and one of the best defensemen in their entire franchise history. Moving on to the next, and maybe the most decisive player in this entire tier list, I have PK Subban in the elite tier. Now, I've seen some people say that he's a top 5 defenseman, he's not even a top 3 defenseman. Honestly, you could go all over the place. And I think PK Subban, when it comes to his overall ability, especially defensively, I think he is overrated, but I still think he's elite NHL defenseman when he is on his game. In Nashville in the past couple of years, it hasn't been quite amazing. It's been good, but not fantastic, and obviously health has affected that. But I think in New Jersey, he'll get a breath of fresh air, and a definitely good one for him. He'll get a lot more of an opportunity on that, quite frankly, not great New Jersey defense. Moving on to his former Nashville Predators buddy, I have Roman Yossi in the elite tier, and I like Roman Yossi quite a bit. He's a defenseman, I think is definitely a top 15 defenseman, and has a ton of offensive punch. I think, again, the defensive problems are a little bit overrated on his end. I think he's just average defensively. Not the greatest, not the best, obviously, but the offense is what he brings, and he brings it every single game. He's such a fantastic offensive defenseman. Physicality is also pretty solid, but the offense is what Nashville thrives on, and what he brings ultimately every season. Now moving on to the next player in the elite tier, for my Texas-born stud, I got my boy Steph Jones. And some of you guys know I live in Dallas, Texas. As a Dallas Stars fan, I love seeing players from Texas come up and play in the NHL. But Steph Jones hasn't just played in the NHL, he has lived in the NHL and thrived in the NHL. And in these years, the Columbus Blue Jackets, he's been an absolute beast. And it's great to see. He's primed for a breakout season next season with a lot more opportunity. He might not get the same teammates, obviously, but I think he'll do great too. And when it comes to Steph Jones, the two-way ability is so good on his end. Great defensively and even better offensively, especially on a power play, where he can command a power play basically at will. Now, when I said Dougie Hamilton was underrated, this next defenseman in my elite tier is maybe one of the most underrated defensemen of NHL history, and that being Shea Theodore of the Vegas Golden Knights. People like to say that Nate Schmidt is the #1 defenseman in Vegas, and I think that is true when it comes to time on ice, but the best defenseman of the Vegas Golden Knights, it's not even close. It's Shea Theodore. Offensively, he's an absolute firepower. He is so good offensively, so efficient, and on the power play is a gift to watch. Defensively, he's not bad either, has a lot of skill there too, but offense is so good in this department. When he is healthy, he's an absolute beast and a leader for the Vegas Golden Knights. Moving on to the next player in the elite tier, I have Thomas Chabot, and Chabot probably the best player in Ottawa, and it's not even freaking close. He's a fantastic defenseman, and last season I think was elite, especially when he was healthy, and health has been a concern for him in his hockey career in general, but when he is healthy, he's a fantastic defenseman that on the Ottawa freaking Senators is able to put up points consistently, and that is huge. I've always liked Thomas Chabot. When it comes to his draft year, I liked him too, but now seeing what he's able to do in the NHL, just command a team offensively, it's a gift to watch. Defense, he still has to work on some things, but offense, it's already there and in giant spades. Moving on to the next player in the elite tier, maybe one of the lower tier elite players, but still I think elite in the NHL, I have Torrey Krug of the Boston Bruins. And when it came to Torrey Krug, this past season is what proved it to me as elite defenseman. I always liked Torrey Krug in the offense, I was always a big fan of, but this past season, he just put it on a whole other level and almost put the entire team on his shoulders defensively. And when it came to that defense, you had some great guys like Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Chara, but in that playoff run, Krug was the main guy commanding that lethal power play, that amazing offense, and decent defensively too. He has decent all-around ability, but the offense is what he's bringing, and he's bringing it for a long, long time. Now we're moving on to the franchise tier for NHL defensemen, and starting us off, I have Alex Pietrangelo. Of course, the main man for the St. Louis Blues, the Stanley Cup champion Alex Pietrangelo. And Pietrangelo, I think, is one of the best defensemen in the NHL right now. This past season, he was an absolute beast. Points-wise, yes, he's great, but he does so much more off the ice and not even on the ice that you don't really notice. Defensively, he's such an absolute monster. Gets it done every single game, and we saw that during the whole Cup run for St. Louis. Moving on to the first San Jose Sharks defenseman on this tier list, I have Brent Burns in the franchise category. Now, Brent Burns was kind of close going in the elite category, and to me, I love Brent Burns' personality, but the player on the ice is, kind of a mix for me. And again, you guys know I love my two-way defenseman, and Brent Burns is pretty much the opposite of that. I'd call him an offense man rather than a defenseman because he always plays offense. There is no defense to be found there, and it's pretty much a negative defense in his front. Offense is fantastic, puts up a ton of points, and that's his brand. It's fine to put up points, it's fine to not be the greatest at defense, and Brent Burns obviously encapsulates all of that. Now moving on to the first and only Dallas Star on this tier list, I have my boy John Klingberg. And some people might say he's not a franchise-type defenseman, but as a Dallas Stars fan, I would like to say that you're just plain wrong. In my opinion, he's a top 3 offensive defenseman in the NHL today. The Dallas Stars will be nowhere offensively with him. Nobody on that defense can accomplish a sliver of what John Klingberg is able to do. He doesn't put up the crazy points that Brent Burns might, but everything he does offensively is so lethal and so good. On even strength, on power play, in every situation, he is so good in that department. Defensively, I still think there is work to be done, but he was a lot better than he used to be. He used to be a kind of mistake guy every single game, but he's gotten that a lot better and has gotten a lot more reliable through the years. Next up in the franchise tier, I have one of my boys, Mark Giordano of the Calgary Flames. And Mark Giordano, of course, winning the Norris this past season, 100% deserved. He was the best player this past season, at least defensively, and I think that was definitely throughout the year. Offense, he was so good. He's always been a decent offensive defenseman, but he just stepped it to a whole different level and had such a big impact at age 35, which you never ever see something like that, especially. Defensively, he's always been fantastic, but he also stepped that to a new gear too. So he just reached new heights with the Calgary Flames, and like the Flames too, they were fantastic in the regular season. The playoffs though, were a little bit of a different story. Moving on to the next defenseman in the franchise tier, and next up, I have one of my Tampa Bay Lightning boys, Victor Headman. And Victor Headman is a franchise defenseman, pretty much encapsulating that. A fantastic two-way guy that has great offense, great defense, and great overall ability. This past season on a 120-point plus team, I don't think he really rised up that 120-point occasion, but he still was very good. Definitely not a Norris-worthy defenseman in my opinion when it came to this past season, but I still think a franchise overall defenseman with a lot of overall capability. Moving on to the last defenseman in my franchise tier, and next up, I have my boy, Morgan Rielly. And Rielly has been a guy that's been so underrated in these past couple of years, but this past season just got to an even better level. And offensively, again, I think he's one of the best in the NHL today. So good in all different departments. Yes, he has guys like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and John Tavares to play with, but he was one of the reasons why Toronto has been so good in the regular season and somewhat in the playoffs in the past couple of years. Offensively, again, so good. Defensively, I don't really want to mention it because it's not that great. But a franchise defenseman, I think, is what Morgan Rielly is and will be for Toronto. And if you've been keeping track so far, you know that I have one defenseman left, and that one defenseman being in the generational tier. This one defenseman, I think, is the best NHL defenseman, and for me, it's not really particularly close. He's on a land of his own and a tier of his own in generational. And when it comes to that NHL defenseman, that player is Erik Karlsson of the San Jose Sharks. And some people might say that, oh, he's not in his prime anymore, or he's injured, or whatever it might be. I don't want to hear too many excuses, because to me, when he is healthy, when he's on the ice, even if he's 80 or 70%, I would take him above any other NHL defenseman on this earth right now. Erik Karlsson is the best offensive defenseman of all time, the best offensive defenseman in the NHL today. And some people might say, oh, his defense is not that great anymore. That's just plain wrong. He hasn't been bad defensively for a long time. This past season, even in the playoffs, he did make some mistakes, but he wasn't bad. He wasn't a bad defenseman. He's not great defensively, but I would say he's average. And for the offense he brings, one of the best offensive defensemen ever, I'll gladly take that. And I will firmly stand on this toe right here, saying that Erik Karlsson is the best defenseman on this earth right now. I don't know if that'll change next season. I don't know when that will change. But right now, even though he has been injured, even though he has some injury concerns, I would take him injured over a lot of NHL defensemen. And when he is healthy, watch out. Because in my opinion, he's the best defenseman on the planet right now. But of course, with this video, I need to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about my NHL defenseman tier list? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? And the question on to you, who do you think are the best defensemen in the NHL today? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video on my best NHL centers tier list. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on my tier list and what you agree with and disagree with, and I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.